Welcome to the Retaining WIT podcast. I'm Jossie Haynes.
And I'm Jordana Kwok.
This show tackles the challenges of keeping women in tech.
Each episode, we discuss current events, experiences in the industry, and what it takes to create a workplace where women will thrive.
On today's episode of the Retaining WIT podcast, we are joined by Bhavna Bhatnagar, an engineering leader at Rivian in the identity access management space. The main topic of our conversation today is how to be heard and respected as a technical leader. And so often, though, women are assumed to be non-technical. When I was managing at Apple, I assumed I was the project manager. And I even got an apology letter from someone who made that assumption. So I think this is a crucial topic to ensure we're retaining women in tech. Before we dive in, though, let me take a moment to introduce Bhavna. Bhavna has over 25 years of professional experience, starting off as a software engineer who grew through the ranks to a leadership role, mainly in the identity access management and security space. She has global experience, having grown up and studied in India, and then she made her way to the United Kingdom, Singapore, Germany, the United States, India, and then the United States again for her job and family. She is an avid blogger, holds 4 U.S. patents in the identity space, and is one of the authors of the Security Assertion Markup Language Specification. She led and started the Women in Tech forums at UBS, helping younger talent find their voice. She's married with a wonderful supporting husband, lives in the South Bay, and has 2 boys. Bhavna, thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to learning more about your career journey and then diving into our conversation on how to be heard and respected as a technical leader.
Hi, Bhavna. It's so nice to meet you, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jordana, and thanks, Josie, for a wonderful introduction. I'm really happy to be on Women in Technology, Retaining Women in Technology Forum. Excited to speak to both of you.
Yeah, and before we dive into our main topic, could you let our listeners know a bit about your career journey and what inspires you to be a leader in tech?
Definitely, yeah. So if I look back, actually, I come from a family of teachers mainly. I was an introvert. I just know I remember I like to tinker with all kinds of things, right? Be it an iron box, non-working electricity bulbs. I just like to fix things. And at that point, I thought, hey, I would like to be a technical person. And the fact that I was an introvert and I didn't need to interact with anybody seemed like a perfect profession to get into. And then, of course, I loved to, as I grew, I did my degree in computer science, I did my master's, and I just started loving to code and find solutions. I think like Jossie already introduced me, I kind of grew through the ranks as a software engineer, made journey to various countries, got to meet a lot of people, solve problems again in tech space. While I was, going through my journey, I had the unique opportunity of building the Sun's OpenSSO product. I was a staff engineer followed by being an architect of the OpenSSO product, which is in the identity and security space. I spent, I think, like close to 12 to 15 years at Sun. And at that point, I got an international break. I like Jossie introduced, I come from India. And I got an international assignment to start up the sustaining organization for Sun. And by that time, Oracle had people, who come from that time, they know that Oracle acquired Sun in 2007. And at that point of time, I jumped on the international assignment of setting up offices in Bangalore for Oracle's products and Sun's products. Well, that started my journey in India. And then I was supposed to be there for 3 years, but I kind of just got hooked on there. My family was there, obviously. Having set up the IAM team in Sun, I moved on to IBM. I kind of spent my time mostly in MNCs because I kind of thought I would fit only in an MNC culture more. And I also like to get that global diverse perspective. IBM, again, I spent time in security identity, building a bunch of solutions in storage. Then, I've had stints of having been a co-founder of a startup, did a lot of identity solutioning. A lot of people, who are familiar with Reliance in India, that's like the biggest telecom provider. I was one of the architect and developer of their story. Their Geo 4.0 release was I was the program director for that release. Well, then I decided to come back to US. Obviously, you follow where your family does. My kids started coming back to US for their education, and at that point, I thought, hey, it's time to come back to US again. And I came at a pretty bad time. I think I came back during 2019 when COVID was just about there. And I thought, okay, I need to take a break while I'm settling my family down. I started doing a lot of, turnkey projects like CTO work, advising startups. And at that point, I did that for like a year. And when I joined Rivian, I got an opportunity to work in an EV space. And my recent job at Rivian is basically heading the identity and access management teams at Rivian, and we've kind of pretty much re-architected the entire product and rewritten the stack. So that's the exciting journey I've had. I just want to add there that the reason I stayed on to be tech was it was very simple logic. I just thought women are more rational, with due respect to all my male counterparts out there. I just thought women are more rational, more logical. So, hey, I can do this job pretty well and I will do it. So that's how, my journey started and it's been going on.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I love that. Yes, no offense to our male counterparts, but yes, we are very logical and we are good at leading, right? Like the research all shows we are amazing leaders as women. And so we need more of us in this industry. And I love the fact that you worked at Sun. Actually, one of our previous guests actually also worked at Sun, who's in the CTO community, Catherine. And I actually worked at Sun as well in my early career days. So it's funny to see just how many of us used to work there.
That's awesome. I didn't know that, Josie. That's actually amazing to know that you were part of Sun as well.
Yeah. I worked on the Java download and infrastructure group back when you had to worry about the fact that if your download files were larger than 1 megabyte, you'd have issues. So we'd have to break up the Java download into like hundreds of files, which is something nobody today would ever think about being a technical problem that you would solve. So thank you so much for sharing your career journey. And, now as we're heading into our topic, let's dive into, you've been a women leader and you've had both technical and leadership roles. And so what challenges have you faced having both of those aspects and how have you overcome them?
Yeah, that's an amazing question, actually. I think one of the things which women leaders face is, and this is a study as well, there is a lot of problems in finding the right mentor, which is, I think, really important to do anything well in life, be it any field, right? And then also lack of it's like the funnel keeps getting narrower as you grow. So there is a lack of female role models. Obviously you're dealing with gender bias, and you have unequal, sometimes you do have unequal growth opportunities compared to men. And then of course the pay parity is being as a problem which all of us in technical leadership roles and being women we face. I think in with this landscape, right, some of the personal challenges I went through was, as I grew through the ranks, was honestly self-worth, right? Hey, am I good enough? And imposter syndrome. Hey, am I pretending to be somebody I'm not? Especially in the mid management stage, where you're really you're looking for direction, you're looking for mentorship, you're looking for role models, you're dealing with bias. It can get very challenging, and biases is like in all kinds of forms, right? It's a perception about what a woman's role should be, especially when younger women, right? It's your, hey, what if she goes on maternity, right? Child rearing, parenting needs, work life balance, would she be good at all of that? So I felt in my journey, even though I had very supportive managers, I had to work really hard. I had to work double hard to prove, that I can do my job as good as any other male counterpart in my team. And that's always something which I think it's getting better. It's very nice to see so many women in technology who are growing into leadership roles. So I really think the only way we can do well is to watch out for each other, and support each other and help us break our own glass ceilings. I think that's pretty much what I think is going to help women in technology at this point. And one of the mantras, I mean, just sharing, right? I always keep in my mind is be steady in what you're doing, be confident, be composed, because a lot of times we'll end up losing our cool. And at the end of the day, be forgiving. I mean, we can't every time put people under a lens and say, hey, you went wrong here, because, they don't mean sometimes what they say. So be forgiving. And I think that's my mantra.
That's awesome. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing your mantra. And how do you then balance the need to be technical with the need to communicate effectively with non-technical stakeholders? And what strategies have you found to be effective in doing so? I often find that as you grow in seniority, especially in leadership, that your sphere of influence grows. And so there's so much of a need to be able to communicate at the right level for the target audience. So, yeah, I'm really curious to hear how you've done that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have like a bunch of amazing questions lined up. I have to say that. So one of the things I think the biggest challenge, like you already asked, right? You have technical and non-technical, so it's the stakeholder management, and mostly it's upwards and downwards. So you have a team which is your span of control, and you are their technical leader, and you're trying to make sure that they do the right thing in technology. So obviously that comes easier. Having grown through the ranks as a technical person, it's very easy at least to have the technical conversations with your team, which is like managing downwards. I think the challenge comes when you start managing upwards, which is where your communication skills really get tested. And what I have felt what works is always assume that the person knows nothing. Doesn't matter whether it's a technical person or a non-technical person. Always start with a very high level big picture, rise above the complexity. That's the thing I keep thinking. Don't talk complex, rise above the complexity, keep it simple, stay away from jargons, and focus on the business, right? I mean, for example, if you're trying to do something which is reducing your cost or increasing your profit or reducing your risk or is giving you an excellent customer experience, that's something anybody non-technical does understand. But if you for example, I'll like to take an example here. Recently, one of the things which I mentioned we did at Rivian was we didn't have a multi-region solution. So we wanted to go active, have it set up in both regions. But in the process, I wanted to make sure that we rewrite some of the legacy code as well. But the business justification of that is very hard to give, because it's like, oh, just go multi-region and you don't need to spend more than that. But when you focus on, hey, you're going to have less support to do, so maybe you can manage with a smaller team size, the customers are not going to see a downtime, you will have happy customers. That's when people start listening to you. So that's the way I normally handle my conversations, that talk to the audience based on what is of value to them. Focus on the value you bring to your audience.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And absolutely, I think, one of the biggest challenges I think for us as engineering leaders, especially the higher up we go, is we have to explain really complicated technical challenges to business stakeholders. And an example I give is, let's look at the sales leader, right? Like, if they show a P&L, right, a profit and loss statement, everybody knows what that looks like, right? Everyone knows, like, oh, hey, we want the numbers up and to the right? You start talking to people about engineering, they might have no clue what you're talking about and what you're sharing. And so it's so crucial to be tying it back to the business. And so I love how you were talking about that. And so the next question that kind of follows on from this is, how are you cultivating that culture of technical excellence in your team or organization? And what impact do you think having that culture of technical excellence has on your overall performance?
That's, I mean, that's basically something which every leader has to do. And if you don't do it right, it starts showing. So again, great question. I think one of the best things you can do is to start with your team. You should know what your team's strengths are. You should know what your team's weaknesses are, and you should know what the areas of improvement are. I think once you start focusing on the team's strengths and the weaknesses, you can put out a plan in place in terms of, how do you make sure your team is technically excellent. Obviously, then you need to focus on, hey, are you making sure that they're going through the right kind of trainings? Do they have enough mentors? Are we doing enough demos? So those are some of the things you can do operationally, right? I mean, what I do in my team is I do bi-weekly deep dives, I do demos, sprint demos. I make sure that there is a mentor-mentee relationship even amongst my teams based on seniority of who can help how much. One of the larger things that I think what has worked, and it always works, right, is to delegate and you empower your team. And of course, you can't just step away. You need to support them and help them with course correction. But I think the empowerment and making sure that they take the decisions and then they stand by it and make sure that they clean up the mess, if at all, after that, is the key. So unless you make a mistake yourself, you're not going to learn anything. No matter how much I keep preaching and teaching, unless somebody makes their mistake themselves, that's the only way to learn your lesson. And of course, right, empowerment does not come free. Empowerment comes with accountability. So if your leaders have empowered you to do something, then you need to take the accountability of doing it right. And I think that propels you into having an excellent performance, having an excellent work showed. So it's a wheel, right? It's a wheel in motion. You help your team to grow, and they turn back and make sure that they do a great job. One of the things I've seen coming around out of all of this is, I mean, I grew my team from 5 to 27. I had to put a structure in place. I hired some very talented team leads. And then when we went into this whole mentorship training model, and then we wrote this rewritten, massive state-of-the-art tech stack, I realized that the confidence boost, which I saw in my team, was amazing. I mean, the smiles, they were so confident that what they have done is excellent. They took pride in their work. So I always told them, right, we used to have these when we have our annual appraisals. It's like, first, I want to see pride in your work. You need to be proud of what you've done, and rest all will follow.
Yeah, I love your approach there, especially around empowerment and celebrating your team members' wins. It's so important. I often see an anti pattern in leadership, especially engineering leadership, where the people leader, the people manager, makes the technical decisions instead of really delegating that to their teams. And it certainly does not lead to the type of technical excellence that you describe.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I also love that you talked about accountability, right? Because I think so often people assume accountability means you have to be aggressive. And I truly believe that you can have empathetic accountability and really create a high performing team that way.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, and on that topic of technical excellence, something that women often struggle with is being heard and respected in their organizations. So I'm wondering what advice you would give to other technical women who might be encountering this.
Yeah, we've all been there, right? We've heard words like, not probably not on your face, but like bossy, overbearing, oh, she has the pants on, and all familiar terms. Let's face it, there's always a balance we are trying to strike between coming out as amiable versus making sure your voice is heard. And then if there is a perception or a misperception associated with trying to get your voice heard, I think we don't have to be any of that. The problem is more within as much as outside. It's our own self-confidence. If somebody calls us bossy or overbearing or whatever, right? We start believing in that more than anyone else. We start introspecting. We start, hey, is that really true? Hey, maybe next time I shouldn't come out as bossy. Or hey, maybe next time I should not, even if, I'm being spoken over, I should probably keep quiet because otherwise I would come out as challenging or argumentative. But I think you need to pick your battles, really. I mean, you can't just be always at daggerheads here, but you need to have the confidence that what you speak is something you really believe in. And if that is the case, then you need to be firm. You need to show a repeatable success to gain that respect from the counterparts in the team, who probably are not hearing you. You need to show repeatable success. And I say repeatable because it's important to build your credibility. And then, of course, you have to be very transparent. You need to have open conversations. If you think that there is a time when somebody didn't hear you, I think it's perfectly fine to go offline and challenge somebody and say, hey, you didn't give me a chance to speak. If you only had let me make my point, you would have understood what I'm trying to say. And it's a very slow process. I understand it's a slow burn. It's a slow process to be heard, respected, but it happens. As long as you're doing your job well, you're confident, you're collaborating well, you have a good and yeah, I was going to say stakeholder. I think that's the bigger thing. It's all about interpersonal relationships. Sometimes if somebody doesn't like you, we all have faced that. We may be saying the perfect thing, but if they don't like you, they don't like what you're advising either. But if they like you, then it doesn't matter whether your proposal is faulty. You would see support. So bottom line is it's all about people, emotions, and interpersonal relationships. We need to work on that. And if we get that in place, we get the credibility built across our stakeholder network, I think people will start seeking you out for who you are.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I do have a follow up question because oftentimes we give advice to women to change their behavior so that they can be heard and respected in that environment. Do you have any advice for allies who could maybe help shape the environment in a different way for a woman who might be struggling?
I think when it comes to allies, the fact that they are allies and they recognize the fact that there is a segment of the professional population, women in this case, is struggling to be heard. I think that's the first win. And then, of course, the allies can support you in a way that they can create opportunities. So if an ally is in a meeting and realizes that, oh, this person is trying to speak up but not getting an opportunity, you can always, and if you, let's say, wield influence in such a meeting and you see the fact that this person is struggling and you feel for them, or you're an ally of the person, or in general you want to make sure that everybody's heard, you can give an opportunity to that person to speak up. You can speak for them. You can be their sponsor. You can be their support. You can help invite the person. Let's say I didn't get heard in a specific meeting. If I have an ally, that ally would probably call me in a different meeting and say, hey, you know what, this is your open forum and go ahead and explain what your thoughts were. Maybe you didn't get a chance to explain your thoughts there. So I think recognizing the fact that you need to support is the biggest win. And once you get that, then you can leverage them one-on-one, you can leverage their meetings, you can leverage their stakeholder network to get heard.
Yeah, and I think something that's really powerful is having allies bring up your accomplishments, right? Bring up the
Absolutely.
people who might not be heard in other rooms and forums that they're not involved in.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing that advice. And one of the other things that you had mentioned earlier that I had wanted to talk about because I thought it was great was I loved how you talked about getting some of those consistent wins because I do think getting the smaller consistent wins can actually be much more valuable than just getting one big win because that consistency piece really builds trust. So I just wanted to touch on that one because I thought that is such a crucial thing and I wanted to mention it. So, one of the challenges that I talk to a lot of women about is how do we stay technical, right? Especially as you go up the career ladder, a lot of the conversations you're having are not at the code level, right? And so, how do you stay up to date with the latest technical developments in your field? And what are some of the resources you rely on for your professional development?
That's a tricky question, but thanks for asking me that question, Jossie. I think realistically, my experience has said that the best learning is on the job. So I cannot take a decision today that, hey, I need to learn, let's say, Kubernetes, or I need to learn the latest DynamoDB tech stack, and let me just start learning. That's not going to happen. I would lose interest. I would get pulled into different meetings, and that would be the end of my learning. So I think what I have done in the past is, like I said, learn on the job. So when I have a challenge to solve, I just always think myself as well as I challenge the team to think differently. How can you do it? And put out multiple options on how a problem can be solved. So once you have a focused problem, I think you do a better job of doing even, Google searches or self-study, but it's more focused. That's for the tech stack. Obviously, I do a lot of blogging. I write white papers. I try to speak at conferences. And the reason I do that is obviously it helps to get you visibility, and you get to hear a lot of others and their opinions. But also while you are trying to work through your blogs and interviews and white papers, you make an effort to go deeper into the topic. So you would make sure that you are reading about it, you're learning about it. Other things which have worked for me is to find a mentor in your domain, if need be, or maybe one in the leadership space where I'm trying to look for inspiration on how other leaders are keeping themselves up to date. So I do kind of bounce ideas off them to see how to keep myself abreast with the changes in technology. I always try to make sure that I keep pushing myself out of the comfort zone. So the moment my job is within the realms of the tech stack, which I'm familiar with, and I've aced it and I know it all in my mind, then that's when I start looking for something which is outside my comfort zone, learn something new. I also try to go for conferences, free, paid, both kinds of conferences. One of the other things I do, which I've started doing recently, is I've started reviewing demos and providing inputs to, hey, there's a startup, and then somebody knows me that, hey, I can give some inputs in that space. I review the products, I give their advices. If I hear of something new there, which I don't know, I make an effort to go and read up about it. And that has built up my knowledge base. Sometimes I actually review tools which are completely unfamiliar to me, and that propels me in a direction to learn something more. I mean, I'm just sharing bits and pieces of things which have worked for me in the past. But yeah, I definitely feel that it can get pretty challenging when you go higher to stay technical, because it's no more coding, like you said, Jossie. It's going high level and more strategic, and you just want to make sure that you're not completely in the dark on something. You can't learn a technology because there are like 5,000 plus technologies out there. I think the right thing to do is to develop domain excellence rather than a tech stack excellence, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing those insights. And, one of the things you touched on, which I think is important, is like the power of your network and community as a learning experience, right? And I think a plug for the CTO community here, right? It's a great place to meet other women leaders and potentially even form little learning groups and
Right.
find how to support each other. So often we end up feeling really alone as women leaders in tech, right? Because we tend to be the only ones potentially in our organization. And so it can be so wonderful to leverage other folks for learning and sharing ideas as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for saying that, Josie. I mean, I have recently joined CTO thanks to Nidhi and Suja, who introduced me to this. And I think the whole camaraderie and the support which you get with the other women leaders through CTO is really an example of how much networking can help you, how important it is to find the right mentor, and you're not alone. I think that's the main thing. You're not alone in it.
Hmm. Yeah. And I love even just like informal coffee chats. One thing I always ask, especially when connecting with other leaders in different companies, is what's your tech stack look like? Right? I learned so much by just asking that question. And that's one of the ways to really keep up to date to see what everyone else is doing.
Thank you so much, Bhavna, for joining us today on this episode. It's been really great hearing some of your insights. And before we wrap up, we like to end each episode by asking our guests to share a retaining wit tip of the week. So, what is one tip that you'd like to share with women in the tech industry?
So I have a survival tip. The tip is grass is not always greener on the other side. So, when you're sitting across the table with somebody, don't think that they know more than you. You're probably equally smart. And that's my survival tip, which it has worked for me.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Short and sweet. I love it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jordana. Thanks, Josie. Awesome
All
speaking to
right.
both of you.
Yes, it was great having you on this episode. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thanks both. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This podcast comes to you in collaboration with the SheTO community. Did you know that less than 9% of engineering exec roles are held by women? SheTO is on a mission to change that. SheTO is a private network for women and non-binary engineering leaders with the goal of accelerating careers of our members and building their high-powered network. Learn more at sheto.org.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Retaining WIT podcast. You can keep up with our episodes at retainingwit.com, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast shows. Please be sure to subscribe and leave a review so we can grow our audience. Thank you.